her to play the violin for me, but she's too shy to do it. So she'll do it as long as it's not in front of the camera. So just like background music.
Yeah, actually, she's really good.
Yeah.
She wants to be professional, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, her violin is quite special. It's about 200 years old. It's from Belgium.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's go. You ready? This is the Active Podcast. My name is Ian I'm your host, Ian Simpson, and I'm here with Okay. Let's do it. That's plugged in, yeah.
Wait, before we start, what time is your mom coming back for you?
I'm calling.
Oh, okay. Okay, just want to make sure we're not still recording when
Yeah.
we get someone knocking and saying, "Sumimasen?"
Yeah.
Okay, that's recording. Okay, so. This is the Active Podcast. My name is Ian Simpson, your host, and I'm in the studio here today with my co-host Matthew Coleman. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here. I'm excited about today.
For sure. And our guest, Masayuki Ishida. Masayuki, perhaps you could just give us a quick intro, self-intro?
Yes, of course. Hello, my name is Masayuki Ishida, and I'm 17 years old, and I'm currently in the second year of Takada High School. And it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for being our guest. You speak incredible English.
Thank you.
Why is that?
Actually, I was the first person to complete the 200 Edge online video lesson, which is Edge online lesson by Ian Simpson, our host. And I can highly recommend this system to anyone looking to improve their speaking abilities.
Well, thank you very much. Did you tell him to say that? That's a good plug.
No, that was totally spontaneous.
Yeah.
Thank you. But also, you lived in the UK for a couple of years. right?
Yes, I lived in the UK for 2 years when I was 7 and 8 years old. And I went to the English school with many other native kids and some from other countries. So I really like that school.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so sorry if it sounds a little bit hollow today, the sound, but we're on the road and we're using lapel mics in the middle of the table, but hopefully it's clear enough to be pleasing on the ears for you. So, Matthew, how was church today?
It was very, very nice. It's the first Sunday of Advent. So Christmas is coming, it's always something to look forward to, but in this area of Japan it's still nice and warm, so that's always something to enjoy.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Did you ask for forgiveness for me?
I ask for everything for everyone.
Because I'm sure I've done something wrong. Or I will do something wrong, according to my wife. That reminds me of that old chestnut, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? Did it really happen? You know, I saw a great t-shirt the other day. It said, if a man speaks his mind in the forest and no woman hears him, is he still wrong?
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, today's topic it's a big topic, but we're going to break it down into two areas. Is the education system broken? So the first half, let's talk about the Japanese education system specifically, and particularly with the speaking English, learning English for Japanese people in mind, with that in mind. And in the second half, let's talk about the world education system, the history of it, and in general, is it broken and does it need to be repaired or revolutionized?
Okay.
What do we think? Yeah. So let's kick it off with the Japanese education system. I mean, I'm a business owner. Have a small chain of English schools here in Japan, and Matthew's senior teacher in the Eikaiwa system over here, and you are actually a student in
Yeah.
the Japanese system.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
So
a student.
yeah. So we got the three generations. You got the 17-year-old generation, and Matthew, you're out of 4, and maybe I'm out of 5. And, so we
Yeah,
can
but if
come-
anyone's listening, I'm going to claim in the 3s.
so we can come at it from different generation angles, you know. First of all, Matthew, you're the stats man. Why is Japan so low on the world rankings of ability to speak English?
Well, that's a huge topic in itself that hopefully we'll discuss over the whole time here, but I did find out that depending on what source you're consulting, they're probably around the 30th percentage there, and the Nordic countries along with the Netherlands are at the top. And I lived for 2 years in Sweden. I can honestly say I've never seen such wonderful English ability.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And in Asia, Japan is ranked about 10th, I think.
Yes, they're even ranked behind Korea.
Oh, yeah.
So I did have experience with some Korean English education, learning from friends who I went to school with in Sweden. It's a bit different.
Yeah. So what are some of the reasons why we have this situation?
Yes. Well, many people think that they don't have to speak English because right now most of the residents in Japan are Japanese, so they speak Japanese, and they don't have to use English in their daily lives or in business. Well, not yet. Well, they will have to, but not yet. So I think that's the biggest reason why Japanese people don't really feel like they have to speak English.
Yeah, the not yet thing. I've had this discussion with many parents over the years about, well, let's get my kid speaking Japanese fluently first, then we can worry about English later. This seems to be a misconception that Japanese people have, that, well, you can start learning it at any time, it'll be okay, you can learn it when it's older.
Yeah.
And the brain doesn't really work like that, does it? So my thinking on it, and I say to them, the earlier the better.
Yeah.
Yes, from the linguistic approach, that's much better. The sounds are much more distinct to children. They can perceive far more nuance, even babies can. So, and the old thinking used to be, if a child learns 2 languages at the same time, they're going to be confused. It's not good for them. And some teachers in many countries still say that, but we know that's not true.
No.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that because when I went to England, I was 6, and well, it's hardly I can hardly say that my Japanese was hardly perfect itself, but at the same time I started learning English, and I kind of I was able to connect the Japanese word and English word by perceiving them at the same time. So that's why I get to speak. I get to acquire the knowledge of English pretty quickly.
Yeah, I've seen kids who grow up in environments like communal housing where you have people speaking 5 languages, and they're exposed to that from a baby, and guess what? They end up speaking 5 languages.
Yeah.
They can do it. The brain can cope with that. We know that. But so that's one of the reasons, I think. I watched a video the other day interviewing Japanese people on the street in Tokyo, and there was a bit of a mixed opinion, like Masayuki says, as to whether they actually needed to speak English. Well, I don't know whether we actually need it because we're a small country and not many foreigners come here. That was one half of the argument. Other people who could speak English, by the way, and who had travelled, were saying, absolutely, Japanese people do need it. It's the language of the world. Of course, we need it. But again, it's a big city thing versus a countryside thing as well. You go to the big city, and a lot of people can speak English.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Well, actually, there are some students who can speak English, but there are very few in my school. Most of them they are good, but not good enough to communicate, and they're not confident enough to speak up in English in my school.
Confidence is a big thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I would guess that you're probably better than most of your teachers.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
If I know most of the Japanese teachers in Japan, I mean that's that takes it into another. I mean, a lot of the Japanese teachers in Japan don't have the confidence to speak English out loud. They talk to the ALT teachers in Japanese if they can.
With the new educational requirements regarding English coming into effect soon, that's going to be a huge problem for total immersion classes. That's not going to be sustainable or attainable at that point.
And well, yeah. Well, as for my English teacher, he sometimes speaks English by himself, but mostly he like works with the pair English teacher. So I mean the ALT teacher. So it is true that he kind of depends on him.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see the Japanese English teachers being made to go overseas as part of their university course. So you have to live overseas for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
And come back as a fluent speaker. Otherwise it's like me saying, well, you go and teach this. You go and coach this rugby team rugby, but so well. I haven't played much rugby in my life. I'm not very good at rugby. Oh, but you go and coach them rugby. You would never do that, would you? But we do it in English. So you can't speak English very well, but go and teach that class how to speak English. And now it's embarrassing because a lot of the students are better than the teachers. So.
That could be part of the culture too, when it's just an emphasis is put on maybe perfection. Students feel less likely to volunteer their ideas, to really try. But it's not a standard thing. There are exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, I've taught in all levels of school in Japan, in addition to when I was back in the UK as a high school teacher, and Australia, and in Japan, the system as it is, as such, the way we assess teachers is by how many of their students go to university.
Yes, totally. So when we look for the cram school advertisement, and the school advertisement, they put how many students got into Tokyo University or how many students got into Kyoto University up front. So they kind of emphasize the number of students who pass the test.
Right, yeah. And so when the universities are not demanding a high level of speaking ability to get in, then guess what? The teachers, the English teachers, are not focusing on speaking because it doesn't help them personally to get students into university.
Yes.
So the teachers have no motivation to teach speaking. Because all they are concerned about is what the head teacher and the assessors think of them as a teacher.
Yeah.
That's right. As on these tests, there is no place to speak English. Therefore, why should it be in the curriculum?
Yeah.
Yes.
I did not know that. Well, in my school, I think they do put emphasis on English as a subject, but it is also true that we don't have much time to speak English.
Okay.
We take much time to write, and we take much time to listen and read, but we don't have much time to actually speak English. What we used to when I was in junior high school, but not anymore in high school.
And I remember I was teaching in a private high school in Japan just a few years ago, and I think the kids were having 8 English lessons a week, and it was 7 grammar reading, writing, and then one with me, oral communication. And then the system, the government, whatever, said, okay, you can now have 9 lessons a week. So we had an English teachers meeting, and I said, great, it's going up to 9 lessons. So perhaps that means I could have an extra oral communication with them, so that the balance would be 7 and 2, which is still very weighted on one side. But what do you think about that? And they just shot me down. And one teacher in particular, he said, no, I think we should have another grammar lesson. And he said, and he looked at me and he said, and you should remember that maybe we don't actually need you or ALTs at all, because remember we can put a CD in the CD player, press a button, and hear a native speaker speak.
Yeah.
And I looked at it. Did you just really say that?
Yeah.
He did. He actually said that.
That's disregarding so much research into pedagogical techniques and student success. I mean, the speaking component should be equal to the grammar, because I was always taught, for example, in any kind of English class, that your speaking and writing should match. It's an extension of your knowledge and who you are too. So it should be part of that. It's how you learn.
Yes, and thank you. Also, like listening to CD, listening to a laptop, speaking to and having communication with an actual person is pretty different, because that's the kind of the thing with us, because the teacher tells us to listen to like this English CDs, but they do encourage us to speak to ALTs, but we have much. They don't give us enough opportunities to do so. So and I don't think it's effective to do so.
Is the ALT ever the main teacher in a class, where they really take over and do a lot of the speaking components and say, let's use this grammar?
Actually, we do, yes. Actually, well, I had this fully, I had the class where ALT take over the, or take in charge of the class once a week when I became the second year of high school. But that's for the 4 years I haven't had that.
Okay.
Well, there was always an ALT and a Japanese teacher.
Okay.
I've been given free rein in a number of schools to teach on my own over the years. But then again, I had almost 20 years experience as a teacher in the UK, so they probably trusted me to do that. Although my grammar's terrible, but I mean that's interesting. I mean, that's another point. I mean, I was born at a very young age, and believe it or not, by the age of 2, I didn't know any grammar, and I couldn't read or write. But guess what? I could speak English.
Yeah.
And all kids can speak
That's
English.
right.
They do not need grammar
That's
to
right.
speak English.
Yeah.
But we forget that sometimes.
Well, that's mentioned in some of those videos too that we see online. Just speak. Speaking is the most important part. Don't worry about your mistakes. Don't worry about this. Just speak.
Yes, totally. Because when I first started learning English in the UK, well, actually, what I did was I just mocked everything else said. Everything everyone else says. So, yeah, actually, to be honest, the first word that I remember was marbles, because there was a friend of mine who always carried a small, tiny marble, and he showed me this marble, so I just repeated the word marble, and I remembered it.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't know how to spell it, but I just keep doing it, and a word became a sentence, and the sentence became like a communication, and that's how I learned English.
I think it's quite clear that the Japanese system does not use ALT teachers effectively.
Yes.
They don't know how to use ALT teachers effectively, which is one of the big problems. And they don't give them enough lessons. The kids don't get enough exposure, and even the new system that's coming in now for the elementary schools, I think they're playing at it. You know, it's
Once a week is really not enough. If you're expecting any kind of fluency, it's not. It has to be an everyday thing, like we do with other subjects.
Yes. Well,
Yes.
if we can't take a whole lesson of English every day, then we can just have like 10 minutes of communication time every morning or every after school, or at least.
Yeah. And we got this moving out of the actual schools into maybe the Eikaiwa system. You have this hobby versus motivated learning. you know, we know as teachers, a lot of our students, they come to our classes for something to do. You got that a lot of students like that, and you've got some students who are highly motivated to study, our doctors, our professional people. But this is another problem, isn't it?
I think it is. It's, you know, it's seen as has to be this or this. If it's the education system, it happens in a school, in this one room, but then not outside of that environment. Mm-hmm. Therefore, that can stop your mental train of thought, and that flexibility, you need to be able to use it. Mm. But then we have that group of people who say, well, I'm studying English to ward off dementia. Yeah. And you think, well, that's great too, and that does work.
Yeah, nothing against that, but yeah.
However, how are you using that outside of the classroom? There is English everywhere in Japan if you look for it outside of the classroom, but I think people are trained that it only happens in the school. Mm-hmm. When it's encountered outside of that environment, it's maybe not even noticed.
Yeah, well, actually, many of my friends will think so too, because we are like taught to how to solve the questions mm-hmm. of English subjects, but we're told not to we didn't have much information about how to use it in actual life.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you don't learn how to, for example, have a constructive debate with people on an intellectual level, like make a statement, then support it.
No, we don't.
Okay, that's integral to English. I mean, you must say something, then support it.
Yes. But the very nature of Japanese teaching style is dictatorial, isn't it? So I talk and you listen and don't ask me any questions. It is getting better. I think it is getting better.
Well, that used to be the monitorial system that we had in Europe and North America as well, but that had to change. It wasn't working. There was no creativity. Yeah.
So tell me, Masayuki, tell me, why sometimes have I stood in front of kids in the junior high school or high school, and I've asked them a question, and I know that they have opinions, they have ideas, and they will not open their mouth, they will put their heads down, they will not say anything.
Yeah, I don't really, actually, to be honest, I don't really understand, because I grew up in UK where everyone spoke up, but in my opinion is that at the early age, there's a Japanese saying called saying that if you stood up, you will be shut down. So, and it's kind of Japanese nature to work in harmony and correspond with each other. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the reason why they don't want to stand out in the crowd.
So, for example, if they have an idea that they think might be slightly controversial, they really don't want to say it because that might create discord, which is really against a cultural value. Yeah. So that could be very cultural, or it could be, not wanting to make a mistake, which is also part cultural.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important to recognize, and how do we deal with that issue?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, being grey is good in Japan. And Masayuki, I mean, every time I talk to you, you seem to be saying to me, well, I've got tests coming up, or I'm doing tests, or I've just finished my tests.
Yeah.
Are you ever not doing tests?
Actually, well, there is a no test period. But even in those no test period, we have like small tests.
Yeah, you have mini tests. So what do you think about the amount of testing in the system over here?
Well, I don't really oppose it because it kind of gives some people the motivation to get good scores. But those who don't get good scores, even though they work hard, it can be like the obstacle. It can be the reverse, giving the reverse effect of like depriving them of the motivation.
Right.
I think it's also an inherited thing. That's from ancient China, for example, with state testing system.
Yeah.
There's always another test to take, and if you don't pass this one to a certain degree, it could mean, your whole future.
Yeah.
Of course, in different systems that existed in Western countries too, we still do have many standardized tests, but not to the same nth degree as you find here. It's more on creative thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's obviously a place for testing, but I can't help thinking that it's way overdone.
Yes.
You know.
I think it's more important to
Japan.
say with like English or an organic thing like that, say what can you do? Show us what you can do, not necessarily on paper.
We've talked about this, haven't we, in our
Yeah.
in our Edge video lessons, where we talk about that learning and education is not linear; it's organic.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But our system is basically a linear system.
And it's based around the testing system. Like if conversation isn't on a test, then why is it it wouldn't necessarily be in the curriculum. Yeah, so that's the same in many countries, honestly, but it depends on what degree.
Okay.
I think here all my students say they're just always taking a test. There's never a moment when they're not studying for a test.
Yeah.
And if you're going to think, well, the answer has to be A, B, C, or D, and it's too inflexible to say, well, it could be A or B, that's not a good thing.
No, we put so much value on the scores that kids get in tests, and in the second half of this chat, I want to talk more about that, because is it really important whether you're getting, if you get 90%, does that make you a more intelligent person than someone who only gets 40%? And we won't talk about it now, but maybe how do we define intelligence? So let's go into that in part 2. But let me bring up another point, that we've got 3 major sporting events coming up in Japan in the next few years. We've got the Rugby World Cup next year. We've got 2 Olympic Games coming up. How is that going to affect? Is it going to affect? What influence will it have on English in Japan?
Have your teachers said anything about this with regard to English and how it might be used?
Well, they mentioned it sometimes, but they don't really emphasize it, because right now we're like starting to prepare for the college entrance exam right now. So yeah, all the teachers are trying to get the students to focus on it. Focus on the test a year ahead. So yeah, they're like trying to cut out every single distraction around us.
Well, I have seen that some of the students have told me that the Japanese government is looking for volunteers, but at the same time they've raised the TOEIC score, minimum TOEIC score needed to be able to, for example, be a translator or a guide. Which has discouraged some people, because they thought, oh, my ability is pretty good and I really want to do this, I want to communicate. But then it's being shut down.
Well, I've heard there's a panic. They're panicking in Tokyo, because especially in the service industry, medical in particular, because they just do not have enough people with skills good enough to cope with all the amount of foreigners that are going to be coming in. And in the middle of August, drinking too much beer, and even if you don't drink too much beer, you often fall over because it's so bloody hot. And then being rushed off to hospital, no one can communicate with you. It's like
yes. If you try to call the emergency number here in Japan, there's no one who can speak another language, so they'll just keep saying sumimasen, sumimasen, until someone eventually hangs up.
So let's hope that there's some trickle down from those events, and it motivates people to speak better. Okay, right. Oh, how would you change the system? I mean, just a quick few thoughts on what would you like to see in our current system in Japan for teaching English speaking.
So you mean like the system?
Well, yeah, the system, the lessons, the teaching style, anything you want.
Yeah. Well, there is an idea. Like, for example, So there is a grade, and right now we like kind of move on. We're like forced to move on from grade 1 to grade 2 and grade 3, regardless of the score, unless you're like really bad. But that doesn't like even if you move to grade, if you move a grade, that doesn't mean you fully acquire the knowledge you learn from that grade. So what if there's a system where students can learn at their own pace, and getting the, they can take time acquiring all the knowledge they have to take in that certain grade, and then move on to the next grade.
Now, how do you think that could be implemented? Because right now in Japan, it's all based around testing, not necessarily like creative, moving at your own pace kind of thing. So it would be more than one system that would need to change. So, I mean, many jobs could be lost, or many jobs would have to change.
Yeah, well, but right now there are tests. It's true, but the biggest test we are facing right now is a college entrance exam. So as long as you have the ability, you acquire the ability during the high school years, then no matter how long it gets to graduate high school, it's good. It's okay because we get the ability to be good enough to get into college.
Okay, but that test is only offered once a year, so if your ability is not as good as you wanted, you have to wait an entire year to retake it and hopefully get in where you want to be, and by then you could lose your motivation.
Yeah.
You could forget a lot.
But so yeah,
not you personally.
Yeah. But that is true. But but it's but losing the motivation is it is kind of personal, but the environment also has a great effect on those kind of motivation. So maybe it's important to like maybe it's important for the teachers to like make the environment to motivate the students.
Okay, so if they use more creativity in their lessons and they have the permission to do that, instead of the rote learning system, then it could engage the students more.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and that was going to be my point. I mean, I'd like to see more debate, more conversation within the lessons, particularly more group work, and then sort of moving into problem solving and critical thinking exercises, all in English, where you get people actually thinking, thinking and discussing and debating and disagreeing with each other and using English in a functional way that motivates them.
That's right. Rhetoric, logic, those are all classic courses that many of us have had to take in Western countries in order to be able to function and to communicate in a very creative way using our critical thinking skills. And that's something that's missing here quite a bit, that could be included in the education system.
Did you have Matthew, any more ideas, or was that was it?
Well, I think we'll get into quite a bit more too.
Okay, alright. Right, before we move on, I would like to have a shout out to our sponsors, the Edge Performance Analysis Solutions, who sponsor this podcast, and without whom we wouldn't be able to do this. And actually, today's podcast is brought to you by the one of the products in the suite of Edge Performance Analysis Solution products called Xword. And as it happens, the creator of Xword is sitting here with us, Masayuki. You actually created this, didn't you? Tell us about it.
Yes, so Xword is a customizable testing program for teachers. So it's basically a quiz program, English quiz program. Yes, and the good thing about this program is that it is like super simple to use because it is made using Microsoft Excel. And also teachers can customize the questions and modify it as they want and create an original version of Xwords. And also another good thing about this program is that every time the program checks the answer of a student, it records and creates a scorecard, which you can print out just by clicking the button. So it is a really good program. I'm really proud of it, and hopefully this program will help your students improve and learn the English. And this product will be on sale in January 2019 at Active English platform.
Yeah, on the Active English, go to the Active English store and you will be able to find it from January, priced very reasonably. And actually, big news now. We just finished what do you call it? Black Friday.
Yes.
What we call this late Black Friday. If you're a listener of this podcast and you go to buy the X Word product and you go to checkout and there's a discount box there, write in 50% in numbers, 50% in numbers, and you will get 50% off the price. Can't say better than that, can you?
Right.
For these active podcast listeners. And can you believe this guy actually wrote, he's a programmer, he wrote it at 16, 17 years of age. That's incredible.
That's amazing. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Being a programmer is kind of a dream when I was younger. And I actually started programming when I was 15 years old, and I just loved it, and I kept doing it every day, and I became good enough to make a program that can be useful to others, and I'm really proud of that.
You should be.
Oh,
Yes, you should be very proud of that.
Stay friendly with him because
Yes.
he's going to be the next Japanese Elon Musk.
Yes, you can do so many things to help me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, January, check it out. Oh, it's a downloadable.
Yes, it's downloadable, yes. Or if you have Microsoft Excel on your laptop, and yeah, it should work.
Right, great. Right, thanks to The Edge and thanks to Masayuki for creating that X-Word product. Okay, let's segue into the second part of this discussion, which is the education system broken on a worldwide level? But just to give it some perspective. Matthew, you've been doing some research on the history of the education system.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I mentioned a little bit with the Prussian and monitorial systems. A lot of the universities and schools used to use a monitorial system. You throw everyone in a big room and you just have someone lecturing. So that does sound very similar to Japan, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yes. But in the Prussian system, that was developed initially by Frederick the Great in the 1700s. But that has gone through a few changes, and then that was borrowed in the mid-1800s by Horace Mann into the American education system, and changed to suit our needs or what courses needed to be taught and how. But it did have initially a lot of creativity built into it, that it was really meant to for people to shine. Initially it was not so flexible because it was in the Prussian militaristic kind of state where there was limited freedom of speech, but there was an enlightenment going on. But there is some flexibility in it, in that if your district says, yes, you have free reign to teach this in the way you want, but we do still have to meet national requirements or state requirements, you can do that. And so many educators, like Sir Ken Robinson, or if you watch any of the Khan education videos or maybe TED Talks, they do talk about, is it broken? Well, it seems like what many of them are saying is we want more creativity. We want all the subjects, not only the STEM subjects, but also the humanities, to have the same weight.
Yes.
And of course, if you look at them, if we just take a second to look at the American education system, it's not the same across the board. Each state has different requirements. We do have standardized testing. But then we also have things like private schools, parochial schools. We do have institutions like magnet schools that maybe concentrate on one particular area.
Yep.
Students do have to learn other things, but they don't have the same weight. Those can be in the sciences, those could be in the humanities. It depends on what you want to study. But those are located mostly in the cities.
Yeah.
In the countryside, it's generally more the standard, but there is some flexibility built into that where a highly intelligent student like Masayuki could skip grades and end up in university at the age of 15.
Yeah.
It depends on if you can do it, you have the ability. So it's not only the intellect, but the ability.
Yeah. Well, I read some stats that, you're American. It's
Yes.
not your fault. But
No.
you're,
During the Bush years, I was French Canadian. Now I'm back there again in the Trump years.
and so I read this up to, in some places in America, up to 60%, there's a 60% dropout rate. And even with the native Indian race is an 80% dropout rate. Yeah, and I mean, and in schools in general, you have kids with a large percentage of kids lacking motivation and just general apathy within the class. What are some of the reasons for? Am I correct on those stats first?
Well, it depends on where you are. Those numbers are quite
High.
inflated, I think. I do have a friend who teaches on a Native American reservation. And it could be a cultural thing. I asked her about this. It could be also that they don't see as many opportunities for themselves in the future with an education, even if they have it, because maybe they want to stay in the reservation, in which case they might have several different jobs that they do and they wouldn't be using what they had learned.
But in general,
Yes.
there's just a lot of apathy in the classroom, a lack of motivation from many students.
Yes.
Well, in my school, it depends. We were divided into 3 homogeneous groups. So you had the college-bound courses, you had the business courses, and you had the vocational technical people. So some of those people were really motivated maybe by an academic point of view, like in the Prussian system with the gymnasium, you're just going into research, going into the academics. But then the other people might not as much. They need more practical skills, less theory-based. So for like 60%, that might be, for example, in the inner cities where there's a lack of funding in the school.
Right.
There could be a lack of safety. And the teacher salaries would be quite low, and also the local lack of value for that demographic in the education system, that it won't improve their life.
Right. So you had that system in America, no kid left behind.
Yeah.
Right, but by the very definition of that, I don't know if anyone else understands the irony. You do leave kids left behind because you're concentrating on one thing and not another. It's not comprehensive.
But should we be having the same the same education system in those tough inner city schools that you have in the more what do you call them, Ivy League schools? Or
Those are the universities.
The higher end schools with the more academic. Should we be having the same programs in both schools? Does that make sense?
Well, the interesting thing is with the original Prussian system as it was borrowed, it was supposed to put everyone on an equal footing. But with private schools, you're immediately throwing money into a system that creates inequality. So if we did have maybe free universities instead of tuition-based, that might help more with that. But also you have to go into these inner cities or maybe into reservations or places where people just are not seeing the value of education helping with their social mobility or their lives, to be able to change that. So one of my friends did teach in the inner city in Harlem, and that was quite a different experience for her. That was a very unsafe situation on many levels, but then there's a lack of value in the education system that's a generational problem that needs to be combated.
Well, when I was Masayuki's age, we went from, in the UK, we went from a what do we call it, a secondary modern system to a comprehensive system. So that meant when it was secondary modern, you would do the 11 plus, and then you'd either, if you passed the 11 plus test, you would go to the higher school, or you would go to the lower school. So it was like segregated. And then they said, no, that's not good. It's got to be comprehensive. So we didn't call them high schools, we called them comprehensive schools. And everyone went into one school, and everyone had we had mixed ability classes, and we did away with all the streaming and the segregation and the fast tracking. I mean, again, how do you see that as a student?
So should we like separate students or not?
Yeah, should we separate students or not? Is elitism a dirty word?
Like, is the homogeneity like that I just described in the school I experienced, should that continue?
Well, I personally, elitism doesn't sound good, but personally I don't think that's a bad idea itself, because people who do know what they want to do, they want to focus on that, because and if they're taught to do something else, they're not motivated to do so, so they lose. So it's like a waste of time.
Okay.
But so I think it is not that bad to give students an opportunity to concentrate on what they want to do. But it is also true that some students don't know what they want to do. So maybe there should be a course for people who don't know what they don't want to do, and find what they want to do, and people who do know what they want to do. So I don't think the concept of elitism is not that bad.
Okay. So, yeah, I was just going to say, I think this homogeneity thing is not bad. Elitism is different. It's like saying, no, you can't come here because of your social status. And I think the education system was really not built for that in some ways, but we do see it with tuition-based education in many senses.
Well, let's change elitism for fast tracking then. I mean, it's fast tracking. To me, that's part of life. Some people are just naturally gifted. Why should they be held back? Why should they not be fast tracked?
Well, Masayuki and I were chatting a bit about that, because I've been asking people for months. In Japan, for example, can someone move ahead if they're intelligent? If they are brilliant, can they go to school like Doogie Howser did, and become a doctor at the age of 15 or whatever? But that's not a possibility here, whereas it is in the US, for example. And in England, is that a possibility?
Not usually. It's not common.
Okay.
I couldn't name you one example. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but not common. And I was in the education system for 20 years over there, so I almost never saw kids jumping years.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but you think about the 10,000 hours rule. All right, the 10,000 hours rule says that to become an expert at something, to become a professional level, expert level, you need 10,000 hours. Whether that's true or not is debatable, but it's got to be. It's pretty much on that mark.
Yeah.
So if you work it out, that's 10 years of 3 hours study a day to become professional or expert level. A bit like your sister Oka is doing. She's how many hours? She's playing the violin, by the way.
She plays like at least 2 hours a day, and sometimes she's playing it the entire day.
Yeah, exactly, all right. Yeah. And because she wants to become a professional violinist, so she has to do that. So you bear in mind now that a lot of people are winning Olympic medals, anything from 15 years upwards, right? They can win snowboarding, gymnastics, those kind of Olympic medals, skating, from a very, very young age. So if you work it back, if you want to win an Olympic gold medal, or on the academic side, it could be the same as well, writing, programming, whatever. If you take it back 10 years, if you want to be the very best at 18, then you have to go back 10 years. So you need to be starting at 8 or younger, doing 2 to 3 hours a day for 10 years to get you to Olympic gold medal level at 17, 18.
Yeah.
Wow, right? So does our system allow for that? I don't think it does.
I think in the American system, which is partially based on the Prussian system of education, that there needs to be more creativity at an earlier year, an earlier start, at like kindergarten level, and factor all of that in. But not separate people, but you allow them to fast track, allow them to get good at what they do. Yes, start languages earlier, for example.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And because at the moment you've got a lot of unmotivated kids. You've got a lot of kids sitting all day doing low clerical work, which leads to low motivation. Because that's basically what it is. Of course they're not motivated because they're not stimulated by what they're doing, right? So why not say, well, why do these kids have to follow the courses for so long, and actually until the end of high school? They have to. Masayuki, how many subjects are you studying currently? 12 or 13? About?
Yeah, about roughly, yes.
12 or 13 subjects he will until he finishes high school.
Well, of those, from a motivation point of view, like in the US, we're allowed to choose our courses to like stay motivated. Then like you can focus, like if you want to focus on art like my brother did, then that's what you go into.
From what age?
We were doing that as I guess it would be like the junior high school level.
Right.
Okay.
So, because for example, in university, our bachelor's degrees take 4 years, but your first year, you're basically taking a variety of courses to find out what you really like, what you're interested in. And then the rest are electives. So how many electives do you take as opposed to mandatory courses that you're really not interested in?
Actually, there was an option in my school. There's an option between physics or biology, and the choice of history or geography.
Okay.
And but I think that's it actually.
That's very limited, just 4 tracks,
Yeah,
really.
4 tracks. Yeah.
You know, we've got basically kids, all of us, we're either right-sided brain or left-sided brain. We have a bias towards one or the other, yeah? So STEM subjects or the arts and the humanities. So in order to keep kids motivated, why don't we allow them, let me throw this at you, why don't we allow them to choose at a much earlier age? For example, I would say from grade 1 in high school or even grade 2 in high school, why not cut it down, say, okay, no more 13 subjects. Choose the 5 or 6 subjects that you're passionate about, that you're motivated about, that make you want to go to school.
Yeah.
And do those and focus on those for the next 3 years. What do you think about that?
Well,
That sounds good, right?
Yeah, it totally sounds good. Sounds brilliant. And I can say that many of my friends at school they want to do so. They want to focus on like 5 subjects. Or say it's mathematics, physics, or more humanities sides, whatever. But the current university entrance system is what they have to cope with, because